latest wave of attacks on Iran. Israel says they targeted what they say was the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' military university, as well as a number of other sites, including ballistic missile launchers and ballistic missile arrays. That remains a key target for Israel as we see them work their way down their target list. As you pointed out, U.S. Central Command says they have struck more than 3,000 targets in the first week of the war. Israel said just a couple of days ago that they have struck, I believe, about 2,500 targets. So you get a sense of how large the operation is as it very much continues. The U.S. President Donald Trump and the Defense Secretary vowed that this effectively would expand and they would see larger and larger strikes as we move into the weekend and as we move into the second week of the war here. Meanwhile, as that happens, we see Iran firing back. What's interesting is that over the course of the last several days, we have seen more of the incoming Iranian ballistic missiles happen several times during the day and the evening. Last night, there were at least 3 rounds of incoming ballistic missile fire in the overnight hours. So Iran at least retaining some ability to launch at Israel. Meanwhile, on the Lebanese front, Israel continues to go after Hezbollah targets there. What's interesting there as well is that Hezbollah media and the Lebanese Ministry of Public Health have said that Israel has conducted commando raids into the country using helicopters and some small number of ground forces that have engaged in firefights with Hezbollah militants. So it seems that Israel is pushing deeper into the country. This isn't a ground incursion or a ground invasion at this point, even as Israel has taken more positions along the Israel-Lebanon border. But we will certainly wait to see where this goes from here. Keep in mind that over the course of the past 48 hours, Israel has issued evacuation warnings for large swaths of southern Lebanon, basically the entire south of the country, as well as large parts of the capital of Beirut and parts of the Bekaa Valley. So Israel has the forces up there as it continues pushing and vows, at least right now, that Hezbollah will be disarmed before they scale back what's happening and the Israeli strikes in Lebanon.
Yeah, Aaron, I just want to bring up this map of all the strikes, the U.S.-Israeli strikes into Iran, and it's quite widespread. You mentioned here that the 80 fighter jets in those pre-dawn strikes in Iran were really targeting ballistic missile sites, military bunkers, and so forth. What is our understanding of the degradation of Iran's military capabilities? Do we have any insight on that?
So we've gotten some of this information from the Israeli military. They say they've targeted somewhere between, and I forget the exact numbers, between 60 and 80% of the ballistic missile launchers, as well as either 60 or 80% of the missile and air defenses. So that's been a key target. That's actually a lot of what has allowed the Israeli Air Force and the American Air Force and American Navy to basically have free reign over large parts of Iran. It's because they were able to take out the air defenses, and that's why you see the Israeli military putting out videos of their fighters over Iran. It's because of that freedom they have to operate. But this has always been an asymmetrical war. Iran was never going to put up its air force and match it fighter to fighter with the U.S. or Israel. Iran's weapons have been their ballistic missiles, and they still have those, at least to some extent, as we saw here last night, as well as their one-way attack drones, and then some of their other capabilities. That's what Iran is using here to fight back, as well as their determination to stay in the fight here. And that's what we're seeing on day 8.
Yeah, and Masoud Pezeshkian saying they are not going to surrender. That coming just a short time ago. Oren Lieberman, thank you so much for that update. I want to go live now to CNN's Paula Hancock, who's in Dubai. Good to see you, Paula. I want you to give me a bit of insight into what has happened in Dubai today, the interception, specifically a lot of news out of Dubai airport. What is the latest there?
Yeah, so Eleni, this was a couple of hours ago. We did hear the interceptions. We also heard the alerts, the emergency alerts, telling us to stay inside. And it does appear as though there has been some kind of impact near or in the grounds of Dubai International Airport. We're waiting for official lines on that. What we did hear is that flights were suspended temporarily. We heard from the Dubai Media Office saying that it was for the safety of passengers, airport staff and airline crew. But then just half an hour later, Emirates said that all the flights had resumed, and if you had a flight this afternoon, you could presume it was going to go ahead. Now, we did speak to a resident of Dubai who was inside the airport when the blast happened. Let's listen to what he saw.
Well, shortly after 9 o'clock, we were at the Terminal 3 at Dubai International Airport, and there was a large impact. A lot of smoke could be seen from the glass. It seemed to be within the airport perimeter, but obviously in these situations it's quite difficult to tell. There were vibrations, reverberations. What was extraordinary is that the way the Dubai authorities within the airport reacted. There was professionalism, there was calm, there was no panic. The passengers showed no panic either that I could see.
And certainly that was the case when we were at the airport a few days ago. It was a very calm and organised atmosphere. Now, at this point, it's unclear whether it was a direct hit, whether it was debris from an interception. We certainly have seen a number of drones and missiles continue to be able to impact the Gulf nations. Here in the UAE on Friday, officials said they intercepted 9 ballistic missiles, 101 drones, and they remain on high alert. We also saw in Saudi Arabia that officials there saying that 20 drones were approaching the Sheba oil field when they intercepted them. Also, the Ministry of Defense saying that there were 5 separate waves of attacks since midnight. So even though we are hearing from US officials that the ability of Tehran to be able to retaliate, that the number of ballistic missiles and drones is dramatically reduced from the beginning of this war, they are still able to get some through. And certainly more than 100 drones coming towards the UAE on Friday is still a significant number, but the air defense systems here and also across many of the Gulf nations are working as they should. Well over 90% of what is coming in is being intercepted. Eleni?
I'm going to bring you more now on the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. The Israeli military says it has struck more than 500 targets since the war began. Jeremy Diamond is in Tel Aviv. And Jeremy, we are seeing huge displacement of people. I think that one NGO putting up more than 500,000. We have seen more than 200 people killed. You were close. You were in the Israeli side of the border. Give us a sense of what you and your team have witnessed today.
Yeah, that's right. A very active situation at the border between Israel and Lebanon. A lot of fire between both sides. We heard everything from artillery strikes, airstrikes, to drone and missile fire from both ends of the border. All of this as this new front in this war between Israel and Iran very much heating up.
Oh, wow, that was a drone that seems to have just made impact here. There were no sirens warning, but we just heard an explosion right here in Metula. We're right along the Israel-Lebanon border, and we just heard something come in fast over our heads and make impact. Okay, so we're gonna put our vests on now because we just saw not one but 2 projectiles coming in. Still not clear exactly what that was, but we're now starting to hear the outgoing Israeli fire responding to it. We're just hearing a lot of activity right now, kind of going in both directions, in fact, as this new front in Israel's war with Iran is very much heating up. So that smoke right there just came from Israeli artillery that was being fired from behind us. So it went over our heads. We then saw it make impact there, and you can see the smoke that's still coming up from the target location. And now, okay. He's so used to it. And that was hitting the same spot. Yeah, getting very active here now. Here too. So we're seeing several areas now in southern Lebanon that are being struck by the Israeli military. And some of those positions that they are hitting are within a kilometer of the Israeli-Lebanese border. And that's significant because all of these positions in the most southern part of Lebanon were supposed to have been cleared of Hezbollah fighters over a year ago. And so the fact that Israel is now having to hit positions so close to its border suggests that Hezbollah is trying to re-infiltrate those areas. And obviously Israel now fighting to try and rid those areas of Hezbollah once again.
So, Issa, you could see and hear some of those cross-border attacks that took place today. We've now learned from the Israeli military that 8 soldiers were wounded as a result of some of those very same types of attacks today. 5 of them are in serious condition. 3 others were lightly injured, according to the Israeli military. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, we are witnessing the mass displacement of hundreds of thousands of people in the Lebanese capital of Beirut, as the Israeli military yesterday issued this fairly unprecedented order, evacuation order for almost the entirety of the Dahia, those southern suburbs of Beirut that are known to be a Hezbollah stronghold. The Israeli military carrying out intense strikes not only in southern Lebanon, which we could hear from our position today, but also in the capital of Beirut. And the question now is, where is this all headed? We certainly witnessed today an intensification of this aspect of the conflict, and we know that the Israeli military has called up tens of thousands of reservists. They are occupying portions of southern Lebanon. Question now whether they will push even deeper.
I want you to tell me about the latest news, Paula, about interceptions in Dubai this morning and any impact that you can tell us.
Well, Eleni, as you got alerts and heard interceptions overhead in Abu Dhabi, it was a similar situation here in Dubai and also in Sharjah. This is another emirate which has been largely untouched over the past 7 days. They also got an emergency alert. So at this point, we're looking into exactly where points of interception may have been, where points of possible impact may have been, but we are hearing from officials that they remain on high alert for anything that might be incoming. Now, we have been hearing from the US side, from the department, the Pentagon, and also the Joint Chiefs of Staff commander, that the number of missiles and drones that Tehran is able to send has sharply dropped. But here in the Gulf, they are still continuing to be able to launch them. Now, we do know that certainly from the first couple of days of this war, the number of missiles is sharply down. But the number of drones, yesterday, for example, there were more than 100 drones that were intercepted coming into the UAE. And that, of course, is the concern, that Iran is still able to continue targeting these Gulf nations in the way that it has been. Now, Iran does say that they're targeting military targets of the US, they're targeting American political centers. It's very clear they are targeting far more than that, and we have seen those impacts here in Dubai with a couple of hotels having impact potentially, though, from interceptions of missiles or drones rather than a direct hit. We've seen airports being impacted, and energy infrastructure is definitely something we are seeing more of across the Gulf. Saudi Arabia, for example, we know that there were attempted targeting of that this morning. We heard from Saudi Arabia that there were 5 separate waves of attacks since midnight. We seem to be seeing a pickup there. Also, 3 missiles intercepted on their way to Prince Sultan Air Base. It's a Saudi military base, but we know in the past US military jets have been housed there. So the ability for Tehran to be able to target the Gulf nations at this point, well lessened from the beginning of this war, from Saturday and Sunday, which was far more intense, is still not being completely cancelled out. We heard from CENTCOM, Central Command, in the US, that they had targeted a drone carrier ship from Iran. They say they hit it, it was on fire, but of course there is still this ability. Eleni?
United Arab Emirates have all intercepted missiles and drones headed towards their countries. CNN senior producer Bijan Hosseini is monitoring all this. He is once again live for us from Doha, Qatar. What's it like there this morning?
Hi, Alex. All things considered, pretty calm here for the time being. We know that in the UAE, within the last 30 minutes, our team members across 3 different cities, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and Sharjah, have received emergency alerts on their phone that a missile attack is ongoing. So we'll continue to monitor and update you all on that. Attacks being sent into Saudi this morning as well, waves of missile and drone attacks on oil facilities and on the Prince Sultan Air Base. We know, according to Saudi's Ministry Ministry of Defense that those have all been intercepted. In Bahrain, alarms going off this morning for residents there, asking them to seek shelter. We don't have any additional information on hits or how many projectiles have been fired into that country. And we know that Kuwait yesterday saying they shot down 12 drones and 14 missiles. Yesterday here in Qatar, the Ministry of Defense confirming to us that 10 drones were sent to target the country. 9 of those were intercepted. We know that one did hit in an uninhabitable area of Qatar, according to the Ministry of Defense. This all comes after U.S. Central Command on Thursday said that Iranian ballistic missile attacks had decreased by 90% and that drone attacks had decreased by 83%. Obviously, in the UAE, they're still getting those alerts. They've been absorbing the brunt of Iran's retaliation. Here in Qatar, as I said, a fairly quiet night, all things considered, from what we've experienced in the last 8 days. We know that Civil Aviation Authority here in the country announced overnight that they're going to partially reopen the airspace here, which of course is a huge relief to the more than 8,000 passengers we know that were stuck here as they were transiting through Doha's a major airport hub, the Hamad International Airport. And after that announcement of the reopening of the airspace, we heard from Qatar Airways that they would begin operating limited flights from the capital here to 5 major cities: Rome, Paris, Madrid, Frankfurt, and London. So a little bit of a relief for the passengers here, but obviously still attacks incoming for our colleagues in the UAE at the moment.
Yeah, because there was some question about, does Iran have anything left after all of this? And clearly, at least for the time being, they do. Not sure if he can hear us, but...
Yeah, Alex, yeah, exactly right. I mean, we haven't seen sorry about that, just a bit of a delay there. You're exactly right. We have seen, as I said, you know, a brief pause of hostilities here in Qatar, but still every single day, all these Gulf countries, minus Oman, have experienced attacks from Iran. So a bit contradictory to what we've heard from U.S. Central Command. Yeah, but we'll just have to wait and see here, Alex.
Part of southern Lebanon. Israel says it struck an Iranian command center in Beirut today, amongst other targets, and Lebanon reports at least 217 people have lost their lives in the fighting so far. Jeremy Diamond went up to the border with Israel today, didn't you, Jeremy?
Yeah, that's right. I was along the Israel-Lebanon border, which was a very, very active scene today. Just one cross-border attack after the next, going in both directions. At one point, my team and I saw 2 projectiles flying directly over our heads, hitting a location in Israel very close to our position. Subsequently, we saw Israel responding with one artillery shell after the next. Those were also whooshing over our heads in the other direction, hitting targets inside southern Lebanon that were really not very far from the Israel-Lebanon border. And that was what was really so stunning about this crossfire that we witnessed today, was the fact that it suggests that Hezbollah is re-infiltrating positions that they had abandoned or been forced out of over a year ago amid Israel's attacks on Hezbollah at the time and the ensuing ceasefire that resulted, Lebanon's disarmament of Hezbollah south of the Litani River. All of that seems to have been for naught to a certain extent, given the kind of pace and the intensity of the crossfire that we saw today. In fact, 8 Israeli soldiers were wounded today, 5 of them seriously as a result of one of those Hezbollah attacks on an Israeli military position in northern Israel. Inside Lebanon, of course, we've been witnessing the intensity of Israeli airstrikes there, not only in South Lebanon, some of what we were able to see and hear today along the border, but also in the Lebanese capital of Beirut, where yesterday the Israeli military issued this very widespread evacuation order for almost the entirety of the Dahia, those southern suburbs of Beirut that are considered a Hezbollah stronghold. And then subsequently overnight, the Israeli military carrying out intense airstrikes there, destroying several high-rise buildings. And again, of course, you know, this is deepening a humanitarian crisis in Lebanon, where you now have hundreds of thousands of people out of their homes, some of them living on the streets. And And again, it's not clear, how much more this could potentially escalate. We did see Israeli military tanks on the border. Residents in the area told us that they were seeing more and more personnel and materiel moving in towards that border as well. The looming question now, whether Israel will deepen its control of just a thin strip of land in southern Lebanon and go for a broader ground offensive once again.
And what sort of sirens have you been hearing in Tel Aviv tonight, Jeremy?
Well, just moments ago, we had once again air raid sirens sounding, indicating that Iranian ballistic missiles were being fired. We have, of course, seen those barrages diminish in size and scale, as Iran is sometimes firing as much as just a single missile at a time, which makes it a lot easier for Israel's air defenses to be able to intercept that. That's all the result of the U.S. and Israeli strikes on those ballistic missile capabilities. They've destroyed some 60% of those missile launchers that can be used to fire at Israel. And the result of that is that while we've seen shrapnel falling, we've seen a direct impact yesterday that didn't result in any casualties, we haven't seen any casualties in Israel, any fatalities, I should say, since Sunday, since the second day of this war. And so we will see whether or not that holds up, of course. But certainly there's been a major diminishment in Iran's ability to fire these missiles. But now, as this renewed threat of Hezbollah, and at times Iran and Hezbollah coordinating their missile attacks at the same time.
Jeremy, appreciate it. Live in Tel Aviv for us tonight. The Iranian strikes against Gulf states continue, but not at the rate they had been, as Jeremy was describing there for Israel as well. Over the last 24 hours, Iran's ballistic missile attacks have decreased by 90%. US Central Command adds that drone attacks are down by 83%. This as Qatar's air defense says it successfully intercepted a drone attack targeting the US airbase earlier on Friday. Air defenses are also being put to the test in Kuwait, where falling debris has caused some damage. The war is pushing up the price of oil up to some of the highest levels in the past few years. The energy minister of Qatar tells the Financial Times that oil prices could hit $150 a barrel within weeks. Oil prices are hitting their highest level since late 2023, and Brent crude prices have gained 9%, hitting $93 per barrel. It's Saudi Arabia, though, that is the big supplier, and Nick Robertson is there for us today to give us a picture of that, that critical oil market.
Yeah, it really is. One of the tests that oil-producing countries like Saudi Arabia, like Kuwait, like the others all face is that their normal production levels, they ship it out. But when they can't ship it out, they have to put it in storage, and there comes a sort of a saturation point for their storage fairly quickly. So they're looking at the situation right now. If there isn't a resolution to the war, and the Trump administration is talking about this maybe taking as long as a couple of months, that really means for them they've got to address their output capacity. This has long-term knock-on effects. All the Straits of Hormuz get opened, but they're also part of the calculation is, are they going to get drawn into the fight? And although Iran's output of drones and ballistic missiles may be down a little today in Saudi, it's been very focused sort of on one area in particular, Prince Sultan Air Base, just outside of the capital Riyadh here. 3 ballistic missiles intercepted in the early hours of today, and that was the first time, by the way, that Saudi Arabia had actually admitted that it had intercepted ballistic missiles. About an hour or so later, there was a drone fired in pretty much the same area. After that, a cruise missile fired in the same area. After that, 3 drones fired in the same area. All of these intercepted. Then another hour later, after those 3, another drone. And then a few hours ago this evening, after a break of a number of hours in those barrages, a cruise missile was fired in. So Iran really trying to go after that particular airbase. And so, for Saudi Arabia, it's looking at the threat that still exists and this hard dynamic of what to do about its oil production over the longer term. And of course, as we heard from the energy minister in Kuwait, as you were mentioning, this can and will have long-term knock-on economic implications across the globe, and that's a worry.
Dramatic surge in strikes inside the country, in Tehran even. Give us a sense of what the US and Israel have been targeting overnight and throughout the day.
Yeah, that's right, Issa. Well, today alone, the Israeli military says that they have struck over 400 targets in Iran. They are continuing, of course, to hunt those ballistic missile launchers that threaten Israel and its population. We know, of course, that those attacks have been largely successful in destroying at least 60% of Iran's ballistic missile launch capabilities, and has resulted in a reduction of the number of ballistic missiles that Iran is firing towards Israel. In addition to that, we're continuing to see efforts by Israel to go after Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps as well as internal security forces targets as well. And the hunt that Israel is embarking on to kill as many senior Iranian political leaders as possible is also continuing, as the Israeli military is indicating today that they struck a secret bunker of the former supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei, which was beneath regime headquarters in central Tehran. The Israeli military releasing a video of this strike and saying that in recent days it appears that this command bunker was being used by some of Iran's current leadership as well. They have yet to actually talk about any specific individuals who they believe they have killed as a result of this strike, but it shows, of course, Israel's continued ability and desire to go after Iran's political leadership in addition to targeting Iran's military capabilities.
Yeah, and for Israel, this is, of course, as you and I have been discussing, it's a two-pronged war as it takes the fight to Lebanon, where I'm just seeing more than 200 people have died, where almost 500,000 people have been displaced, according to one NGO. Give us a sense of what is happening in Lebanon.
Yeah, well, my team and I were along the Israel-Lebanon border today, and I got to tell you, it was very active, far more active than I even anticipated, especially when you consider the fact that Hezbollah, for over a year was supposed to be gone from the areas closest to Israel, pushed back not only by the Israeli military and continued strikes, some of which continued even during this ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, but also by the Lebanese military, which was in the process of and had claimed success in disarming Hezbollah south of the Litani. But what my team and I saw today suggests a conflict that is only escalating.
Wow, that was a drone that seems to have just made impact here. There were no sirens warning, but we just heard an explosion right here in Metula. We're right along the Israel-Lebanon border, and we just heard something come in fast over our heads and make impact. Okay, so we're gonna put our vests on now because we just saw not one but two projectiles coming in. Still not clear exactly what that was, but we're now starting to hear the outgoing Israeli fire responding to it. We're just hearing a lot of activity right now, kind of going in both directions, in fact, as this new front in Israel's war with Iran is very much heating up. So that smoke right there just came from Israeli artillery that was being fired from behind us. So it went over our heads. We then saw it make impact there, and you can see the smoke that's still coming up from the target location. And now, okay.
He's so used to it.
And that was hitting the same spot. Yeah, getting very active here now. Here too. So we're seeing several areas now in southern Lebanon that are being struck by the Israeli military, and some of those positions that they are hitting are within a kilometer of the Israeli-Lebanese border, and that's significant because all of these positions in the most southern part of Lebanon were supposed to have been cleared of Hezbollah fighters over a year ago, and so the fact that Israel is now having to hit positions so close to its border suggests that Hezbollah is trying to re-infiltrate those areas, and obviously Israel now fighting to try and rid those areas of Hezbollah once again.
And so as you can see there, Issa, very active crossfire on the Israel-Lebanon border. And today, in fact, Hezbollah was able to seriously wound several Israeli soldiers as a result of some of these attacks. 5 Israeli soldiers in serious condition. 3 additional soldiers were lightly wounded as a result of one of those cross-border attacks. And while we were down there, beyond the projectiles that we ourselves saw, the air raid sirens that went off at one point due to incoming missiles, there were also a number of drone alerts across the northern part of Israel. So this is a front that we need to keep a very, very close eye on, particularly as Israel is issuing all of these evacuation warnings for the southern suburbs of Beirut, for every area south of the Litani River in southern Lebanon, and carrying out intense airstrikes of its own inside Lebanon.
John, you know, this morning we got an alert here in Abu Dhabi. We've got the all clear now, but clearly Iran is still targeting various countries here in the region. What are you experiencing there in Doha?
Yeah, Lenny, let's start with the UAE. I know you guys received those alarms in Abu Dhabi. Team members also receiving, sorry, I'm just getting a bit of feedback here, also receiving alarms in Dubai and Sharjah as well. We know that the UAE successfully intercepted 9 missiles and 109 drones yesterday. In Saudi Arabia, you mentioned those drones heading to the Sheba oil field. This is a massive oil and gas field in Saudi's empty quarter out in the desert. It's operated by Saudi Aramco. They put out, about 1 million barrels of crude production a day. So developments over there, those have all been intercepted, though, according to the country's Ministry of Defense. Also, additional missiles being sent to Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. All of those were intercepted as well. Over in Bahrain, we've heard reports of alarms sounding throughout the capital city there, but no reports of missiles or drones as of yet. In Kuwait, the country saying that armed forces yesterday shot down 12 drones and 14 missiles. And here in Qatar, the Ministry of Defense confirming over the course of Friday that 10 drones were launched from Iran. 9 of those successfully intercepted, with 1 hitting an uninhabitable part of the country. Eleni?
The Iran-Israel war. A humanitarian organization based in Norway says that nearly 500,000 people have been displaced now in Lebanon. Israel issued evacuation orders to Beirut's southern suburbs, as well as a large portion of southern Lebanon. Joining us now live from Tel Aviv is Nick Payton-Walsh. And Nick, listen, it seems now that if there was any doubt as to which partner in this war was more aggressive, there's really not much doubt now that, at least in the way they describe it, both U.S. and Israeli leaders are in it for the long haul, it seems.
Quite possibly, Jim, although while I think it's fair to say the Israeli assault against Hezbollah marks a slightly different chapter to the combined operation that's running with the United States against Iran. I think we'll see that probably endure longer than however the conflict with Iran continues. It's interesting you mentioned that people seem to be in this for the long haul, because you could also possibly read today some of the signals emerging from the White House that they want to retain great flexibility to essentially call an end to this any time of their choosing. President Trump's declaration of wanting unconditional surrender was immediately qualified by his press secretary, just said, to basically say he decides that whenever he wants. And if you remember the goals we've been hearing reiterated again and again from senior US officials, destroying Iran's missiles, its navy, and preventing it from having a nuclear weapon. That was reiterated by the White House's social media accounts just today as well. They are clearly saying they've got about 90% reduction in missile and drone launches. They say they've sunk 43 naval ships of Iran's, and it's pretty clear the nuclear program, controversially on the brink of whatever it was prior to this, is significantly taking damage through clearly all these strikes as well. So it's an interesting moment, certainly, because the messaging we're hearing from US officials is one of maximum bravado and commitment to pushing forwards, demanding full surrender, while at the same time, President Trump is also discussing, too, who he'd quite like to be the next supreme leader of Iran. And that has the flavour of some kind of political discussion in the wings as well. So it's clear that we're seeing A very degraded Iran now, quite possibly because of these strikes, still trying to lash out. We just over here saw interceptions flying over our heads, actually, the second of two quite significant salvos we've seen today here. Iran's certainly not out, but it seems that frequency of these kind of attacks reduced, Jim.
Welcome back to a special edition of Out Front. War with Iran. Tonight, northern Iraq is under attack. A drone just exploding near a hotel in Erbil. Erbil is the capital of Iraqi Kurdistan. Now, the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad in Iraq had just issued an urgent warning about explosions at hotels. And then after there was that drone at a hotel, a pro-Iranian militant group in Iraq now is claiming responsibility for the drone attacks and warning American troops and contractors that it would continue to target hotels across the country. Stunning, frightening, and also a sense of the chaos unfolding. I want to go now to Clarissa Ward. She is out front in Erbil, Iraq. And Clarissa, those drones targeting hotels, how much are attacks intensifying where you are in Erbil in Iraqi Kurdistan tonight?
Well, Aaron, this was about 4 or 5 hours ago that we saw this notification basically telling people to be aware that hotels with foreigners staying in them could be under attack from Iranian-backed Iraqi militias. It's important to remember, Aaron, that there are a lot of contractors, a lot of American contractors who were working on U.S. bases until recently and who have been moved to hotels since this war began. Not literally 2 hours after that alert and warning went out, 4 drones were fired into central Erbil. Most of them were intercepted, but one of them exploded next to a Rotana hotel in the center of town. And this really sending a chill down a lot of people's spines here, because it's the first time here in Erbil, or in northern Iraq, that we have seen a civilian target attacked like this. And now the sense is what to do with all these, not just contractors, business people who are in this area, who are obviously staying in hotels, and for many who have yet to find a clear and obvious way out, Aaron.
Yes. All right. Now, you were also, Clarissa, at the site of where a missile landed. So we'll show everyone the footage there, take a look at the impact. I mean, tell us what happened there and what you're learning now.
So earlier today, Iran basically warning the whole of Kurdistan that if any of these Iranian Kurdish groups launch attacks or launch some kind of a ground offensive into Iran, that all facilities in this region will be targeted. And we actually went to one of those Iranian Kurdish bases and saw for ourselves what that kind of damage looks like, because these camps have been coming under regular attack.
So Ward is in Erbil, Iraq, where a hotel was hit by drone debris. And for the first time since the war began, we have live reporting from Tehran. Fred Pleitkin is there for us. I want to go first to Clarissa Ward. Clarissa, we mentioned there was an incident at a hotel in Erbil. What happened?
So this was earlier on in the evening, Anderson. The U.S. Embassy in Baghdad issued an alert warning people that effectively they believed there was a high risk of attacks on hotels in the Kurdistan area where high concentrations of foreigners are staying. Literally 2 hours after receiving this notification, 4 drones attacked central Erbil. They were all intercepted, but one of them did explode next to a Rotana hotel in the center of town. This obviously is making a lot of people very nervous, Anderson, because here in northern Iraq, this is the first time that we have seen a civilian target attacked in this way, and it's certainly the first time we have seen groups, and these are believed to be Iran-backed militias in Iraq, explicitly saying that that they are going to attack these hotels. Now, the reason that they're giving for going after these hotels, Anderson, is that there is a large number of American contractors and other contractors as well who, up until this war began, were working on bases around this area, but who have subsequently been moved into hotels
in Iran, with hundreds of strikes around the Lebanese capital. Israel has ordered the evacuation of entire Beirut neighborhoods and other parts of the country. Thousands of people have fled, and there is panic and large traffic jams as many try to get out. Matthew Chance has more from there.
Okay, we've got to go because they said there's been a warning from the Israelis that there could be a strike coming in. So we're going to get out of here, Alex.
Where they are going?
I don't know, but we need to get out. Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
No, but we've just been trying to film at this location here in Dahir, and we've been told to move away quickly now. Yeah. People were showing us their phones saying, look, there's a warning coming in. Go around this guy. We've come into what is the most dangerous part of the Lebanese capital, which is a very important stronghold of Hezbollah, the Iranian-backed militia group. It's the place where Israel has been focusing, and you can hear the gunshots outside there, that Israel has been focusing its activity, its intensive campaign of airstrikes against the Hezbollah group. That's often, we're told, a warning to local residents who don't have cell phones or don't have that communication to tell them there may be an Israeli strike incoming. So we're going to get out of here. I mean, this chaos that we're getting a glimpse of in South Beirut, it's all happening, remember, because in the hours after the Iranian supreme leader was killed last weekend in those US and Israeli airstrikes in Iran, Hezbollah, which hadn't struck at Israel since 2024, fired rockets and drones across the border into Israel. And this has been the response. Israel is absolutely pounding South Beirut, forcing thousands of people out of their homes and really dragging Lebanon into a conflict that many Lebanese tell us they're not ready for and they do not want. All right, well, Dahir and the surrounding areas has hundreds of thousands of residents, and we were in a long traffic jam, I can tell you, trying to get out of there. Israel has also ordered the evacuation of vast areas of southern Lebanon, nearer to the Israeli border, to make way for military action there as well. And of course, causing a mass displacement of people now trying desperately to escape the intensifying line of fire.
Happening now here in the CNN newsroom, there's breaking news. Quote, Iran will be hit very hard, direct quote. A fresh warning today from President Donald Trump. Plus, an Iranian senior cleric now saying only a few moments ago, a new supreme leader in Iran could be chosen in the next 24 hours. And later this hour, President Trump will attend the dignified transfer of 6 U.S. service members who lost their lives in a drone strike in Kuwait during the early stages of the war with Iran. Welcome to our viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington, and we're following major developments, including the breaking news, a new threat of escalation from President Trump as the war with Iran enters its second week. The president warning today that, quote, Iran will be hit very hard, end quote, and he vowed to go after areas and groups of people that were previously not considered for targeting by the U.S. Dramatic footage shows huge explosions and fires at Tehran's busiest airport after Israel launched a new attacks overnight. Israel says it used more than 80 fighter jets to carry out these pre-dawn strikes in Iran. The IDF says it hit 16 Iranian military aircraft at the airport. And those attacks are happening as Iran's president delivered a remarkable national address earlier this morning. He said his country will never surrender, just a day after President Trump said he wouldn't negotiate with Iran without a, quote, unconditional surrender by Iran. The Iranian president also apologizing to those Gulf neighbors, saying Tehran would stop striking those countries as long as no attacks on Iran originated from those nations. And all of this happening as President Trump is set to attend the dignified transfer of 6 U.S. service members killed in the conflict, and that's taking place at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware this hour. We'll have extensive coverage of that. My colleague and friend CNN anchor Erin Burnett is live in Tel Aviv, and she'll be joining me for our special live CNN coverage over the next 3 hours. Erin, first of all, bring us up to speed on the situation where you are.
All right, Wolf, well, you talk about the escalation over in Tehran and those pre-dawn attacks that filled the sky with smoke and fire. Here we had alerts, but I will say, Wolf, important, there were fewer today than we saw yesterday. But one thing that stands out as everyone tries to understand what this war's objectives are and what that might mean for where it goes next. The streets here, bizarrely and eerily deserted. It is a war zone, it is a war, but of course it raises the questions on how long that can continue here and across this region. Wolf, one other thing, who's with me here in Tel Aviv in just a moment. You mentioned that news out of Tehran, the state-affiliated news agency Fars, reporting that one of the clerics of the 88 who's going to be responsible for selecting the next supreme leader said to state television, I want to give the full quote here because it's perhaps very important. He said, Ayatollah Mosafari, we have firm hope that with divine success, this work will take place within the next 24 hours. The last time, of course, there was a shift in the supreme leader all the way back about 40 years ago. It happened within 24 hours. And here we are almost, we are now a week past, more than a week past the Ayatollah being eliminated. And still no supreme leader. Obviously, pressure now coming from within. So we're watching that because that could be very significant. All right, as promised, Jeremy Diamond is here with me in Tel Aviv. And Jeremy, that news matters. The leader of the UAE speaking out for the first time, referring to Iran as an enemy. Obviously also significant, all of these things.
Yeah, and the question is whether any of these regional dynamics that we're starting to see play out will either cause the situation to escalate further or whether we could see a potential off-ramp start to develop here. And especially inside of Iran, we've seen some conflicting signals about who exactly is in charge, whether or not there are some fissures that are starting to show between Iran's political leadership and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. So these are all key questions, but it certainly doesn't change the game plan for the United States and Israel at this moment, as both countries are continuing to carry out extensive strikes across Iran. In Iran, over the course of the last 48 hours, the Israeli military has struck more than 300 targets. Overnight, they carried out one wave of strikes that was especially broad, with 80-plus fighter jets going in at the same time to strike everything from ballistic missile launchers to Revolutionary Guard Corps targets and much, much more. And meanwhile, we're still watching this activity in Lebanon as the Israeli military carried out this overnight raid where they killed at least 41 people, according to the Lebanese health ministry. This was an operation where they were trying to rescue the remains of a deceased airman who went over the skies of Lebanon in 1986, actually. His body has been missing for more than 40 years. The Israeli military carrying out this operation, and it seems to have been very deadly, and it did not result in them actually retrieving that body. There was crossfire, apparently, between the Israeli military and Hezbollah forces there as well.
Tragedy there, and I know they say up to 300, according to Lebanese sources, right? People are dead there, in addition to now, 1,200 in Iran. All right, Jeremy Diamond, thank you very much. And to go to Iraq now, which has also become an important focus of this war, a drone attack sparking fires at warehouses belonging to two very important U.S. firms that operate there, the oil drilling company Halliburton and KBR, which is an oil services company, right? So right at the heart of the global economy. That attack was in the port city of Basra, crucial to oil exports, and it targeted a compound housing employees. And this is according to Reuters reporting, and it happened just hours after the United States Embassy in Baghdad warned Americans to leave Iraq. They said that some hotels up in the north and the Kurdish part of the country could be a target of pro-Iranian militias. Well, they had a heads up, but not much, because within a couple hours of that warning, a drone exploded near a hotel in Erbil in Iraqi Kurdistan. It's, in fact, the capital of that region. And contractors, Americans, members of the military have all been using hotels in that area. A pro-Iranian Islamist militant group in Iraq claimed responsibility for that specific attack. And our Clarissa Ward is in Erbil. She's obviously been to that site. She's our chief international correspondent. And Clarissa, what are you hearing now now about this warning, that explosion, and what the risk still is for Americans and hotels. Really, hotels the only place for so many Americans where you are to go.
So it's interesting, Aaron, just in the last 2 hours, there have been at least 2 U.S. airstrikes on the bases of these Iran-backed militias in the Iraqi city of Mosul, a number of casualties as a result of those strikes. And these are the groups, these militias, that have just been hammering U.S. targets throughout the region, but they have also been hitting targets here in Iraqi Kurdistan. Now, you mentioned those hotels. There are so many contractors, Aaron, who were working for U.S. companies on U.S. bases, for U.S. oil fields, who have been moved away from those installations or bases, who are being put up temporarily in hotels. And I should say it's not just 1 or 2. They're in pretty much every hotel you find here in the city of Erbil. And yesterday, effectively, this alliance of pro or Iran-backed Iraqi militias declaring that these hotels are now a target and will continue to be a target as long as they are hosting American citizens. Now, we know that the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad has urged Americans to depart Iraq. They have issued some guidance as to some of the routes that people could try to take, because obviously the airspace here is completely closed, Aaron. They have said that you could try to go by land to Jordan or potentially to Turkey, but still, many Americans and contractors of other nationalities as well still trapped here. And of course, for the leadership of Iraqi Kurdistan, this whole situation poses a profound dilemma. They do not want to be involved in this war. They cannot afford the risk that the Iranian regime will retaliate if they support the U.S., that the U.S. will change its mind about what the strategic objective or what the necessary outcome of this war is. I spoke to one leader here who said one day President Trump says it's regime change, the next day it's not regime change. And so as a result, they're trying to walk this very fine line of appeasing their interests, obviously have a very warm and good relationship with the U.S., but also not wanting to incur the wrath of Iran, and particularly, Aaron, with regards to these Iranian Kurdish opposition forces who are based here in Iraqi Kurdistan, who have made it known that they would like to launch some kind of a ground operation inside Western Iran, and as a result of which we have seen continued drone and missile strikes on those camps, again, just ratcheting up real concerns that this could pose a real challenge, not just for Iraqi Kurdistan, but for the whole of Iraq as a cohesive state, Aaron.
No retreat, baby. No surrender. The words of the boss. I'm Michael Smerconish in the Philly Burbs. President Trump has demanded Iran's unconditional surrender. The Iranian president responded by saying that's a dream they should take to their grave. Trump's rebuttal? Today, Iran will be hit very hard. The president said that under serious consideration for complete destruction will now be areas and groups of people not previously considered for targeting. The Iranian president also apologized to his Gulf state neighbors and said Iran's attacks against them will stop. But soon after he said those words, they had not ceased, raising a question of whether Iran's political leadership can control its military forces. Overnight explosions rocked Tehran. Israel said that it used more than 80 fighter jets in its pre-dawn strikes targeting military infrastructure. Today, the casualties of this war will come to the shores of the United States, when this afternoon the bodies of 6 U.S. service members killed in the conflict will be flown to Dover Air Force Base. President Trump and Vice President Vance set to attend the Dignified transfer. One of America's biggest enemies coming to the aid of Iran. Sources say that Russia is now providing intel on U.S. military targets. And in a Washington Post column today, Fareed Zakaria points out that while Israel might well welcome the chaos of regime collapse, the United States and its allies cannot. Where Trump initially exhorted the Iranian people to overthrow their government, he has more recently changed course and mused about dealing with potential leaders within the regime. In a Friday telephone call, President Trump told Dana Bash that he hopes Iran will go the way of Venezuela, where acting President Delcy Rodriguez is doing what the president called a fantastic job, and said that he was open to a religious leader who was not democratically elected so long as they treat the United States and Israel well. Which brings to mind a different lyric. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss? Maybe the president is open to another religious, undemocratically elected leader, but what about Israel? Writes Fareed, the most dangerous element of this war, however, is not that the lead actor is improvising like a saxophone player. It's that the two countries waging the war have separate and perhaps incompatible agendas. For Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the war is clearly about destroying the Islamic Republic. He acknowledged that this war was the culmination of a 40-year-old dream. He's also using the opportunity to take out Hezbollah, root and branch. Let's go live to the region. CNN international diplomatic editor Nick Robertson is in Riyadh, and CNN's Jerusalem correspondent Jeremy Diamond is in Tel Aviv. Jeremy, I'll start with you. President Trump told Dan Abash new leadership need not be democratic, could be a religious leader. Will Israel be satisfied with that?
Well, I think, first of all, it's important to note that for Israel, the primary concern is not necessarily who is in charge of Iran, but what the behavior of a future Iranian state, Iranian regime is towards the state of Israel and what kind of activities it engages in the region. You know, even if it were to be a non-religious leader who keeps up the practices of arming proxies in the region, etc., then Israel certainly wouldn't be satisfied with that. And I think the question could be posed, I guess, theoretically, if it was a religious leader who accepted Israel's presence in the region, then that might also satisfy Israel's concerns. But ultimately, I think it's about looking at Israel's goals in this war as kind of a tiered system. You know, at the very most basic level, Israel wants to ensure that the Iranian nuclear threat is neutralized, that the ballistic missile threat is neutralized, and then obviously they do have this overarching goal of regime change. And we've been watching as Israeli strikes in Iran have been targeting all of the different institutions of power inside of Iran. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, of course, military targets, senior political leaders that were taken out in the opening hours of this war, as well as other targets throughout Iran, like the internal security forces, the Basij, aimed at trying to kind of take out root and branch, all of the elements that prop up this regime for whether Israel can actually achieve that goal or not remains an enormous open question, particularly, as you were just noting, given the fact that the United States and Israel may not be fully aligned on how far they're willing to go to ensure that regime change is actually the outcome of this war.
Jeremy, thanks for that report. Nick Robertson, the Iranian president, apologized to the Gulf states even as missiles and drones were flying their way. What's been the Saudi response so far?
Yeah, talking to sources, they're not prepared to commit at the moment. Actions speak louder than words. You have, just earlier in the week, the Iranians trying to hit one of the massive oil facilities here in the east of the country. They didn't manage, but debris fell. Part of the plant had to be shut down temporarily. And back then you had the deputy Iranian foreign minister coming on CNN saying, actually, it wasn't us, that Iran didn't do it. So, you know, last night you have the biggest, publicly announced at least by the Ministry of Defense here, Iranian assault more than 20 drones on another major oil field. Ballistic missiles fired at a Saudi air base last night. Missiles whizzing around Riyadh as well that were intercepted. So for the Saudis, look, if this is the beginning of a diplomatic off-ramp of some kind, they will be exceptionally happy and relieved about it. But I don't think anyone here takes it at face value. They know the Iranians well. They know what they're dealing with. The president were in command and control of the security forces in Iran. What he says one day and how he wants to control them one day, again, the caveat, even if he was in charge, and not many people suspect he is, would he change tack in 2 days' time? These are all big questions.
Nick, President Trump in his first presidency was beloved in Saudi Arabia for being hard on Iran. Now they're caught in a war that he started. Has the mood relative to President Trump changed at all?
Yeah, interesting question. Last night I was out asking Saudis that. In fact, I went to the same street where there was the Harley-Davidson cafe. It's been become another cafe now. Talked to the bikers, talked to the residents of this city about what they think. And it was that number of years ago when I was in the same place asking them the same question about President Trump. Look, for some of them, they still love him. They still really like President Trump. They see him as a strong leader. You keep hearing that from people here. And in this region, they love strong leaders. But there's a more nuance to it now. Beloved in part, but kind of feared a little bit because, quite simply, they see the president, because of his actions over the years, they interpret them as being more mercurial. So they're not sure if they get drawn into a war, will the president then back out of it precipitously, leave them in a war? So you have these questions now in people's minds factored in. But he's still popular here, but perhaps more cautiously so.
And good morning, everyone. I'm Bianca Rodrigo. You are in the CNN newsroom. We begin this hour with breaking news. President Trump spoke just moments ago from the Shields of America summit. The summit is mainly focused on stopping narco-terrorism in Latin America, but the president did address the ongoing war in Iran.
We're doing very well in Iran. You see the result, and it's been amazing. We've knocked out 42 Navy ships, some of them very large, in 3 days. That was the end of the Navy. We knocked out their Air Force. We knocked out their communications, and all telecommunications is gone. I don't know how they communicate, but I guess they will figure something out. It's not working out too well.
The war with Iran escalated this morning, with both countries trading threats. Iranian officials say they are looking for new U.S. targets after President Trump warned that Iran will be, quote, hit very hard today. Trump posted on Truth Social that Washington would widen its targets in Iran and that certain areas and groups of people are now at risk of, quote, complete destruction and certain death. Well, both Israel and Iran launched new strikes overnight. Israel deployed more than 80 jets for the strikes, and at one point, Tehran's major airport was on fire. Israel also carried out a major operation in Lebanon. Authorities there say dozens were killed after the raid along the border. Israel says their troops were looking for a missing IDF navigator, Ron Arad, who has been missing for nearly 40 years. In Iran, the president there apologized for recent strikes on neighboring countries and promised to stop them. But then those strikes continued even after his address.
Oh my God. Ya Rabbi.
Witnesses caught the moment a drone fell close to the Dubai airport, as you see in this video, and other countries reported intercepting drones and missiles as well. We are covering these new developments with our reporters around the world. Nick Robertson and Jeremy Diamond are here with me. First, let's go to CNN's Jeremy Diamond in Tel Aviv. A very busy morning there, Jeremy. Sirens had been activated earlier this morning, and we do know, as we had been reported, 80 jets over Iran, taking out additional strikes, as well as to the north of you, the ongoing conflict there with Hezbollah.
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot happening in the region at the moment, and we are witnessing, indeed, Israeli airstrikes in the skies of Tehran, dropping, hundreds of munitions in Iran, targeting everything from Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps command centers to the internal security forces known as the Basij, as well as ballistic missile launchers and stockpiles, some of which are located underground in Iran. We've seen continued Iranian ballistic missile attacks aimed here at Israel, but following the pattern of the last few days, there have been, today at least, no direct hits as a result of those ballistic missiles that we know of, and that is due in part to the degradation of Iran's ballistic missile capability so far. Meanwhile, last night, the Israeli military continuing to carry out strikes in Lebanon, including a deadly series of strikes that accompanied a commando raid carried out by Israeli forces inside side of Lebanon, in the town of Nabishit, at least 41 people were killed as a result of these Israeli attacks that happened as Israeli commandos went on the ground in this operation trying to locate the remains of this Israeli Air Force navigator, Ron Arad, who went down over Lebanon in 1986. His body has yet to be recovered or found, and it was not recovered in this Israeli military operation. But you can see in some of the footage from the aftermath of the strikes that accompanied that Israeli commando raid, massive holes in the ground, damage to buildings. At least 41 people were killed, according to Lebanon's health ministry. And it does appear like Hezbollah forces in the area engaged those Israeli soldiers and aircraft that were there, with Hezbollah saying that they targeted this force with, quote, light and medium weapons as commandos neared a cemetery in that village as they were again looking for the remains of that Israeli Air Force navigator. But even beyond this one commando raid, we are watching as Israel is intensifying its strikes in Lebanon and as Hezbollah is also intensifying its fire to northern Israel. Bianna.
All right, Jeremy Diamond reporting live from Tel Aviv for us. Thank you. Well, even with Iran's president apologizing in an apparently pre-recorded message this morning and saying that Iran would stop hitting its Gulf neighbors, we're hearing reports of new strikes. Iran's military says that it fired missiles and drones at U.S. sites in Bahrain and Qatar. And Saudi Arabia says that it shot down 20 drones overnight aimed at its Shaba oil field. Shaba is deep in the desert and pumps about 1 million barrels of oil a day. Let's go to CNN's Nick Robertson in Saudi Arabia. And Nick, it goes without saying, no one really views President Pezeshkian as the decision maker, as having authority there in that country, especially over this past week. And that has only been confirmed, given that just moments after he issued that statement and that pre-recorded video saying that attacks on neighboring countries would stop, well, they were continuing just moments later.
Yeah, some of the heaviest, particularly around that Saudi oil field you're mentioning in the east of the country, more than 20 drones intercepted. And that's the highest that's been publicly acknowledged, at least by the Ministry of Defense here. There were other efforts to hit Saudi, probably aimed at an airbase, the Prince Sultan Air Base, 3 ballistic missiles intercepted there. But it speaks to the issue that everyone here, as you say, questions who is going to emerge in the leadership role in Iran, and what command and control will they have over the various military security proxies in the region. And I don't think anyone would put President Pezeshkian at the head of a list of likely power figures within Iran that's going to dictate the way forward, given the IRGC's hardline stance, military hardline stance, given that the weapons are in their hands and the hands of proxies who they have the relationship with. And we're just hearing reports of potentially some kind of strike or reports of explosions in Bahrain. Cannot confirm it, checking it out with sources, but that would, if that happened again, that would fly in the face of what the Iranian president's talking about today.
Completely. Nick Robertson, thank you so much. Please stay safe. Well, the escalating rhetoric comes the same day as President Trump will honor the 6 service members killed in a drone strike in Kuwait. CNN's Julia Benbrook is in Doral, Florida, where President Trump is speaking to Latin American leaders. Julia, tell us more about what the president had to say this morning.
Yeah, President Donald Trump, he is delivering remarks at what the administration is calling the SHIELD Summit. This is with Latin American leaders and focused on strengthening relationships there. But he started these remarks focusing on what is taking place in Iran, that ongoing conflict. And he said that he would give his administration a 15 out of 10 when it comes to how things have been handled so far. Now, when he wraps these remarks, we do expect him to travel to Dover, Delaware, to observe the dignified transfer of those 6 U.S. service members who lost their lives. And when Trump first announced that these strikes, the joint U.S.-Israel strikes against Iran, were taking place, he warned that American lives may be lost. And he has continued to say that while he hopes that number is limited, that we will likely see more lives lost. Now, I want to play for you some of his comments as he calls these service members great heroes.
After this, I'll be leaving for Dover, very sad situation, to greet the families of the heroes coming home from Iran, coming home in a different manner than they thought they'd be coming home. But they're great heroes in our country, and we're going to keep it that way. There's always, when it comes to war, there's always that. But we're going to keep it to a minimum, I think, Pete, and going to be a service that we're really providing, not for the Middle East, but for the world.
In addition to the president, we do expect First Lady Melania Trump, as well as Vice President J.D. Vance and Second Lady Usha Vance, to be in attendance there. As far as the timing of all of this, how long this could go on, we have heard multiple different time frames from the president throughout this. At one point, hearing that this could last a couple of days, then through the week. Then most recently, we've heard him saying somewhere between 4 and 5 weeks, but that it could go on longer, and that the United States is capable of handling this if it does go on longer.
Well, we are seeing more attacks across the Middle East this morning, and just moments ago, officials in the United Arab Emirates said the country was responding to incoming missile and drone threats from Iran. Let's get to CNN's Paula Hancock's in Dubai. Paula, what are you hearing now? We were just having a conversation in the last few hours in response to this pre-taped message from President Pezeshkian saying that these attacks and strikes would end. Clearly, that's not the case.
Exactly, Bianna, and it was the case of saying, let's see what happens in the hours ahead. So we now know what happens. In Abu Dhabi, just an hour down the road from where we are, they have had emergency alerts and they have had explosions overhead, potentially interceptions of either missiles or drones, but certainly there have been a number of blasts that have been heard by our CNN teams on the ground. In fact, we have a CNN colleague at Abu Dhabi airport, and they were all told to take shelter as well. So this obviously answers the questions that we had as to whether or not what the Iranian president said would be taken into consideration by the individuals who are in charge of the missiles and the drones. We're also hearing that Bahrain has had emergency alerts as well. Of course, it was a question as to whether or not Pezeshkian actually had control of the armed forces, of the IRGC. It was widely expected that he did not. So even though he was saying that the three-member leadership council agreed this, it doesn't appear to have trickled down or been accepted by more hardline members. So let's just listen, though, to what exactly he did say this morning.
From now on, there should be no attack on neighbouring countries or missile strikes, unless they should wish to attack us from those countries. I think we need to solve this with diplomacy, rather than fighting and having conflict with neighbouring countries.
Now, that's exactly what the neighbouring countries have been saying for the past 7 days, angry at Tehran for taking out their retaliation on Gulf nations. Tehran claiming that they're only hitting US military targets or American political centres. We have seen that the impact has been felt far wider, that the targets have been far wider. Just this morning, in fact, we know that there was an impact at the Dubai International Airport. We spoke to a passenger inside who saw the moment of impact, the blast, saying that the windows were reverberating and they were told to seek shelter as well. That actually grounded planes for some time, but after about half an hour, Emirates said that they were resuming those repatriate flights once again. Bianna.
All right, Paula Hancock's in Dubai for us. Thank you so much. Well, this week, while some in Iran were mourning the death of their supreme leaders, Others in Iran and around the world are celebrating it and welcoming the possibility of regime change.
Tehran's Mehrabad airport on fire, although it's not clear if the airport was struck directly. Iranian state media reporting explosions from one end of the capital to the other. U.S. Central Command says American forces have now hit more than 3,000 targets inside Iran, and that includes ballistic missile sites and command posts of Iran's Revolutionary Guards. Our reporters are covering all of this from various angles. We've got Paula Hancock's joining us from Dubai, but first I want to get to CNN's Jerusalem Bureau Chief Aaron Lieberman in Tel Aviv. Aaron, from what we understand, Israel launching that massive attack on Tehran, and this after we've also heard just a few minutes ago from the Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian saying they will not surrender. Take us through the latest there.
Well, what's interesting here about Israel's statement that the latest wave involved 80 fighter jets is that this isn't even the largest wave of attacks we have seen by Israel. They have used more than 100 throughout the course of the first week of the war in simultaneous strikes across parts of the country here. And you can see that that very much continues. In this latest wave of attacks on Iran, Israel says they targeted what they say was the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' military university, as well as a number of other sites, including ballistic missile launchers and ballistic missile arrays. That remains a key target for Israel as we see them work their way down their target list. As you pointed out, U.S. Central Command says they have struck more than 3,000 targets in the first week of the war. Israel said just a couple of days ago that they have struck, I believe, about 2,500 targets. So you get a sense of how large the operation is as it very much continues. The U.S. President Donald Trump and the Defense Secretary vowed that this effectively would expand and they would see larger and larger strikes as we move into the weekend and as we move into the second week of the war here. Meanwhile, as that happens, we see Iran firing back. What's interesting is that over the course of the last several days, we have seen more of the incoming Iranian ballistic missiles happen several times during the day and the evening. Last night, there were at least 3 rounds of incoming ballistic missile fire in the overnight hours. So Iran at least retaining some ability to launch at Israel. Meanwhile, on the Lebanese front, Israel continues to go after Hezbollah targets there. What's interesting there as well is that Hezbollah media and the Lebanese Ministry of Public Health have said that Israel has conducted commando raids into the country using helicopters and some small number of ground forces that have engaged in firefights with Hezbollah militants. So it seems that Israel is pushing deeper into the country. This isn't a ground incursion or a ground invasion at this point, even as Israel has taken more positions along the Israel-Lebanon border. But we will certainly wait to see where this goes from here. Keep in mind that over the course of the past 48 hours, Israel has issued evacuation warnings for large swaths of southern Lebanon, basically the entire south of the country, as well as large parts of the capital of Beirut and parts of the Bekaa Valley. So Israel has the forces up there as it continues pushing and vows, at least right now, that Hezbollah will be disarmed before they scale back what's happening and the Israeli strikes in Lebanon.
Yeah, Aaron, I just want to bring up this map of all the strikes, the U.S.-Israeli strikes into Iran, and it's quite widespread. You mentioned here that the 80 fighter jets in those pre-dawn strikes in Iran were really targeting ballistic missile sites, military bunkers, and so forth. What is our understanding of the degradation of Iran's military capabilities? Do we have any insight on that?
So we've gotten some of this information from the Israeli military. They say they've targeted somewhere between, and I forget the exact numbers, between 60 and 80% of the ballistic missile launchers, as well as either 60 or 80% of the missile and air defenses. So that's been a key target. That's actually a lot of what has allowed the Israeli Air Force and the American Air Force and American Navy to basically have free reign over large parts of Iran. It's because they were able to take out the air defenses, and that's why you see the Israeli military putting out videos of their fighters over Iran. It's because of that freedom they have to operate. But this has always been an asymmetrical war. Iran was never going to put up its air force and match it fighter to fighter with the U.S. or Israel. Iran's weapons have been their ballistic missiles, and they still have those at least to some extent, as we saw here last night, as well as their one-way attack drones, and then some of their other capabilities. That's what Iran is using here to fight back, as well as their determination to stay in the fight here, and that's what we're seeing on day 8.
Yeah, and Masoud Pezeshkian saying they are not going to surrender. That coming just a short time ago. Oren Lieberman, thank you so much for that update. I want to go live now to CNN's Paula Hancock, who's in Dubai. Good to see you, Paula. I want you to give me a bit of insight into what has happened in Dubai today, the interception, specifically a lot of news out of Dubai airport. What is the latest there?
Yeah, so Eleni, this was a couple of hours ago. We did hear the interceptions. We also heard the alerts, the emergency alerts, telling us to stay inside. And it does appear as though there has been some kind of impact near or in the grounds of Dubai International Airport. We're waiting for official lines on that. What we did hear is that flights were suspended temporarily. We heard from the Dubai Media Office saying that it was for the safety of passengers, airport staff and airline crew. But then just half an hour later, Emirates said that all the flights had resumed, and if you had a flight this afternoon, you could presume it was going to go ahead. Now, we did speak to a resident of Dubai who was inside the airport when the blast happened. Let's listen to what he saw.
Well, shortly after 9 o'clock, we were at the Terminal 3 at Dubai International Airport, and there was a large impact. A lot of smoke could be seen from the glass. It seemed to be within the airport perimeter, but obviously in these situations it's quite difficult to tell. There were vibrations, reverberations. What was extraordinary is that the way the Dubai authorities within the airport reacted. There was professionalism, there was calm, there was no panic. The passengers showed no panic either that I could see.
And certainly that was the case when we were at the airport a few days ago. It was a very calm and organised atmosphere. Now, at this point, it's unclear whether it was a direct hit, whether it was debris from an interception. We certainly have seen a number of drones and missiles continue to be able to impact the Gulf nations. Here in the UAE on Friday, officials said they intercepted 9 ballistic missiles, 101 drones, and they remain on high alert. We also saw in Saudi Arabia that officials there saying that 20 drones were approaching the Sheba oil field when they intercepted them. Also, the Ministry of Defense saying that there were 5 separate waves of attacks since midnight. So even though we are hearing from US officials that the ability of Tehran to be able to retaliate, that the number of ballistic missiles and drones is dramatically reduced from the beginning of this war, they are still able to get some through. And certainly more than 100 drones coming towards the UAE on Friday is still a significant number, but the air defense systems here and also across many of the Gulf nations are working as they should. Well over 90% of what is coming in is being intercepted. Eleni?
I'm going to bring you more now on the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. The Israeli military says it has struck more than 500 targets since the war began. Jeremy Diamond is in Tel Aviv. And Jeremy, we are seeing huge displacement of people. I think that one NGO putting up more than 500,000. We have seen more than 200 people killed.